Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. I hope you're having a fabulous morning. We are, let's see, what's today? Today's the 10th. We are just a hair over 2 weeks away from Christmas. And everybody is so busy. So if you are here, I appreciate, or if you're watching this, whenever that is, whether I'm live or whether it's afterwards, I so appreciate you taking time to spend a few minutes with me to talk about wellness topics. If you are just stumbling on my page, my name is Donna. I'm a mom, a nana, a girlfriend, jazzerciser, runner. I am a grad school student studying for my Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling, program director and 2026 walk manager for NAMI Citrus, and a wellness advocate, which I have been for a very long time. I have been in a lifelong journey with depression and anxiety, and sometimes rounds of severe social anxiety as well. And it was on my heart a few years ago, 161 episodes ago, or more, to start Wellness Wednesday, because I believe that when we share with each other, and this is the reason that pure wisdom works, if you've ever heard that phrase, when we share ideas with each other and we share what's worked for us, what hasn't worked for us, etc., then we help each other find new things that might help us in our recoveries. You know, everybody's different, so some things stick, some things don't, but some things we might not ever try if we didn't hear them from someone else. So with that said, if you are just stumbling on my page, welcome. If you have followed me for a while, then I hope you enjoyed last week's video called The Lost Art of Awe. And last week, I also challenged you to spend 15 minutes outside without your phone, noticing things with all of your senses to help you find that awe. So my question is, did you do it? And if you did, drop a comment, shoot me a message. I want to know what you noticed. So with that said, if you're here, let me know you're here. But if you don't see this till afterwards, a hashtag replay, ask a question, drop your comment, drop your response to last week's challenge, whatever. If you say hi and I don't respond, it's because Facebook sometimes likes to hide things from me, which means they didn't show me all the things. It's not because I'm ignoring you. If I see your comment or question, or I see your little face bubble pop up, I will say hi if I recognize it. If you say hi, I will say hi. Otherwise, I will as soon as I'm done. But I promise it's not because I'm ignoring you. So again, if you did last week's challenge, if you spent 15 minutes outside without your phone, noticing all the things with all your senses, let me know. Let me know what you noticed. And then we'll get started on today. A few weeks ago, I talked about listening for the whisper, which meant basically getting rid of some of the noise so that we could hear that internal voice, the one we want to hear, not the one that tells us we're no good, not the one that tells us we can't do something, but the real internal voice, which is going to be different for everyone. For some people, it's a gut instinct. For some people, it's the Holy Spirit. Everybody's beliefs and perspectives are welcome here. Today, I want to expand on that a little bit by digging into why silent nights, or any other time, are not a luxury. They're absolutely necessary. And I want to be clear about this. When I chose the term silent nights, it was a reference or a nod to the season. But I am absolutely not here to redefine that carol, hymn, whatever you prefer to refer it to it as. What I was trying to do was harness the power of that concept, and talking about the type of quiet that keeps a human from burning out. And this time of year, that's really, really important. So, silence is part of self-care, but I want to be clear on what I mean when I say self-care. I don't mean pampering and spa days and mani-pedis. I don't. I love myself a good pedicure. I'm way overdue for one. My joke is often that the pretty toes are a bonus because what I'm really there for is the massage chair. But that's not what I consider to be self-care. And a lot of times in the wellness arena, self-care is considered to be more like what I'm about to say. And I tend to agree with this. And again, remember, this is all my opinion. And I'm certainly not a clinician. So, this is just me sharing my experiences. self-care is nervous system decompression, especially for somebody like me. It is mental bandwidth recovery. It is emotional detox from noise. It is stepping out of the sensory stampede. I can remember when I was living in one of the things that I affectionately refer to as a holding cell, and I've talked to you guys about holding cells before. And since everything's on YouTube now, I can find that video and drop a link for you in the comments so that you can see what I mean if you don't understand what I mean when I'm talking about holding cells. But I was living in a holding cell, which was a small apartment 6 miles from my house, for about a year. And in that year, it was 2016 to 2017-ish. In that year, or a little over a year, I experienced the most personal growth I think that I have ever experienced. And that was like the one place I've ever lived where I really, really just was devastated to leave it because of the growth that I experienced, not because there was anything special about the apartment in terms of its size, its shape, what it had to offer. It was a holding cell for me to prepare myself for the next level, if you will. So when I say silence, when I say nervous system decompression, especially during the holidays, I would come home from work. I would sometimes go to a business mixer afterwards, whatever. And I would come home and I would open the door of this apartment and I would yell, and I would shut it behind me and I would yell, "Sanctuary!" Literally out loud. My neighbors probably thought I was nuts, because I don't think those walls were terribly thick. And I would not have any noise for the first hour. I would change my clothes. I would prepare for a workout, drink a protein shake, whatever. And I would literally have zero noise for that time because I would be so overwhelmed from all of the peopling during the course of the day, especially if it was a particularly hard day, a lot of meetings followed by a mixer. I would literally, I felt like, the humpback, and I would open the door and shut it behind me and yell "Sanctuary." And sometimes I wouldn't talk to anybody, even by text, for the whole rest of the day. So this is what I mean when I say silence as self-care. It's not just an escape. It can actually be, for a lot of people, physiological maintenance. So why is this so hard? Well, let's talk about that. December is the loudest month of the year, pretty much. For me, actually, there's a couple times of the year that are pretty stinking loud. But for most people, December is the loudest month of the year. And some of these things that make it so loud are year-round obligations, like social obligations and sensory overload and emotional triggers and performance expectations. I have another video I did called Great Expectations, which really, really hits home in that department. And I'll drop that link in the comments too. Family dynamics, distraction, or family dynamics. Silence often triggers anxiety and overthinking. So we are afraid of where our brains will go if we don't have that distraction. And this is true for me too. When I'm running, I have to distract my brain from telling my body that it can't go any further. So a lot of times I listen to music. Sometimes I listen to motivational podcast type things. Most of the time it's music. And it's to keep my brain focused on the beat or the words or the whatever, not focused on whatever area of my body hurts in any given moment, doesn't want to do what I want it to do in any given moment. The music is designed to distract my brain from self-destruct mode, okay? And that is essentially the crux of what happens to us when we are faced with silence. We are like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. My brain's going over here, and up there. And we don't know how to control it. And we don't want it to go the places that it's going because we tend to purposely avoid that, right? So we keep our brains busy. We keep ourselves busy. So a lot of times, another thing is I like a little bit of TV when I'm going to bed. I set the timer usually for 90 minutes. It's kind of a white noise. Usually it's Golden Girls because I've seen every episode at least 10 times. So I don't even have to look at the TV to know what's going on. I can just listen and I know exactly what's going on. And so I can shut my eyes and it's just kind of a white noise. Why do I do that? Well, when my boyfriend's here, it's not as necessary. But a lot of times what happens is if I'm not doing that, I'm not one of those people that sits up in a brain spin all night. I will lay there and I will hear a noise and be like, what was that? And then the next thing you know, I'm having vivid imageries of like all kinds of crazy things happening that are straight out of horror movies, or suspense thriller movies. It basically turns into catastrophic thinking. So a lot of times these noises are intended to distract my brain so that I can do whatever it is I need to do, finish the run, go to sleep, whatever. And we do this especially in the modern day because we're constantly being stimulated. We're under constant stimulation. There's a screen. There's a computer screen at work. There's a computer screen if you work from home. There's a TV. There's notifications on the phone. I started turning my notifications completely off on my phone probably 5 or 6 years ago because I literally was so overstimulated, even when I was at work, that I would be tempted to toss my phone, chuck it into the middle of the highway. Because if I even turned on my notifications for 5 seconds, all of the sudden it felt like everybody wanted to talk to me right there in that moment. And my phone would be buzz, 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 buzz. Even if I still had it on silent, on vibrate, if I turned those notifications on, it was buzz, 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 buzz. And then when I got my watch, it got even worse. So, my point here is that noise is more than a sound. We often use it to distract. We often use it because we're afraid of where our brains are going to go, if we don't have that distraction. And psychology today says silence forces us to confront discomfort, and it kind of creates an echo chamber for our internal doubts. In social settings, we feel like silence is a communication failure, and we often feel responsible for keeping the dialogue going so that we don't convey that we're disinterested, that we're bored, or that there's some kind of conflict between us and the person standing in front of us. I used to be really nervous with silence, and I absolutely agree, we are conditioned to fill that space. I used to be really nervous about silence, and I learned very much not to be. Now, there's an article here where that I used part of for this discussion this morning. And there's one thing where it says that Americans tend to struggle with stillness. Notice it says Americans. That it's a cultural difference when it comes to welcoming silence. And the thing that made me giggle is it said, in America, FOMO runs deep. Fear of missing out. That's what FOMO means if you didn't already know. FOMO runs deep. And Americans often use external stimuli like devices or social media to distract themselves from personal thoughts or feelings that are uncomfortable. And thus, we are less adept at managing boredom through creative pursuits or whatever else. So, it got me thinking. When I was a kid, my mom, I would struggle to go to bed. I would struggle to focus on whatever I was supposed to be doing, especially if we had company, like if grandma was visiting or grandpa was visiting or whatever. And my mother always said that it was because I was afraid I was going to miss something. And when my grandmother got older and needed a little extra care, she often said the same thing, that it was like grandma was afraid she was going to miss out on something. And it's absolutely true. And that is the epitome of the definition of the word FOMO. So some of us are just like that. My grandson's very similar. He's afraid he's going to miss something. So we have to be paying attention, and we have to be involved, and we have to stick our nose in, and we have to be like, what's going on? And that's why. But noise is more than a sound. It is demands, it is expectations, it is notifications, it is hosting, caretaking, financial issues, worries, and holiday timelines. Noise is also, I have to, tell me if this sounds familiar, I need to, I still haven't, and we should all over ourselves, even in the silence of all the things we think we should be doing or haven't done yet or need to do. And noise becomes more than a sound. It becomes a constant pull and tug at our very being. So why is silence good? Why do we want silence, and why should we embrace it? Well, for our bodies, it lowers cortisol and blood pressure. Super important. Regulates breathing and heart rate. Also super important. It reduces muscle tension, improves concentration and focus, calms racing thoughts, improves sleep, and encourages mindfulness. These are Healthline had talked about two different studies, and it talks about high blood pressure, which is often called the silent killer, and that there's something ironic about the fact that silence can actually help reduce the silent killer. They mentioned a study in 2006 that found that a 2-minute period of silence after listening to music significantly reduced the subject's heart rate and blood pressure, even when it was compared to listening to slow and relaxing music. Silence still resulted in more significant increases. Also, another study that they talked about from 2003, where chronically noisy environments were associated with increased heart rate and blood pressure. So you can see there's some actual science, and I love my nerd facts. There's some actual science behind this. So on the soul level, your spiritual level, your heart, your mind, whatever it is that you refer to in that in that department, it reminds you who you are when no one needs anything. When there's not people or things constantly placing demands on you besides yourself, that's when you find out, or when you remember who you really are. It allows for emotional honesty instead of performance. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is being your real self instead of the show you put on for others that you think makes you look extra professional or extra funny or extra fun to be around, or whatever the case may be, or extra got it together. So it gives an opportunity for you to be your real authentic self instead of performing the part that you perform in the daily public eye. Okay. And you know what I mean. That you guys know what I mean, who you really are versus who you show to others. It also creates space for spiritual grounding, whatever that looks like for you, whatever your beliefs are. It's well known that I am a believer in God, but most of the time what I'm talking about applies to anybody regardless of their beliefs. Good morning, Miss Beverly. But it creates space for spiritual grounding, whatever that means for you, and makes the internal voice audible. And that's the whisper I talked about a few weeks ago, which again, I will drop the link to that video in the comments as well. Whatever that internal voice is to you, that gut instinct, that the Holy Spirit, whatever it is, that silence makes space for you to be able to hear that. Okay. And that's a direct tie to what I talked before about listening for the whisper. And silence also helps stimulate creativity, improve communication, and thus it deepens thought processes. And thus, because of all these things, it helps to strengthen connections with whoever you are connecting with. One of these articles I looked at talks about it increasing the profoundness of thought. And it took me a minute. I was like, I'm not really sure what they mean by that. But what they mean by that is it takes you beyond surface conversation. When you're trying to fill what you feel is awkward silence, you're making surface conversation. The sky is blue. The weather is nice. The weather is not nice. It's surface conversation. When you are not trying to fill the silence and you're actually engaging with the person you're talking to, you are engaging. You are having more profound conversation, if that makes sense. Good morning, Steve. I see your little face bubble. So those are the reasons that silence is good. But how do we do it? How do we get to that silence? Because listen, I spend all day long shooting all over myself. What does that mean? It means I'm telling myself that even though my list was this long and I got almost all of it done, I still should have done this, and I forgot to do that, and I need to do this, and I need to do this in 2 weeks. And then I have to tell myself, but we'll worry about that later. That's not what's on the list for today. So there's a lot of noise. So how do we get rid of it? How do we quiet the noise? And this time of year, it's especially important because we find rarer and rarer, or we make rarer opportunities to do this. You can sit in a car for 7 minutes before you enter your house, the grocery store, work, whatever. And you can find silence there. I had an opportunity yesterday before Jazzercise, and I didn't take it because I was like, okay, well, I am waiting here for somebody else because I was waiting for a VIP who's also a Jazzercise instructor, who's in my VIP community, to deliver the prize that she won for my November giveaway. So I wanted to make sure I was there before she got there so we could move it from one vehicle to the other because it was big and hard to carry. In any case, so I had about 5 to 10 minutes there where I had nothing going on. But instead of just sitting there in silence like I really needed to because I haven't meditated in weeks, I was like, oh, I got to do this. And I started doing whatever that was on my phone because I was afraid that if I didn't fill that time that I was going to feel like I wasn't using my time wisely. It wasn't because I was scared of what was going on in my head. It was because I'm constantly on myself to use my time wisely and productively. Hey, good morning, Miss Victoria. And so I didn't take the opportunity that I had to just sit there and probably meditate for the first time in weeks, because I have been so busy and I'm still on this. I have to use every second of my time wisely. That's pressure I put on myself. That's pressure a lot of us put on ourselves, especially if you have any kind of online business, side hustle, second job, whatever. That's pressure we put on ourselves a lot because we're constantly being told that time is something we won't get back and we have to make the most of every minute. So that's what I was doing. But you can sit in a car. If you find yourself in a waiting space, you're early somewhere or way earlier than you expected to be. You can sit in your vehicle for 5 to 7 minutes and just be in silence. Close your eyes, reflect, think, look around, whatever. Don't look around if your eyes are closed. No background noise. That's another way to do it. No background noise. Not even just something on for white noise. No TV, no radio, no sound machine. Complete silence while you're doing whatever you're doing. Makes a huge difference. Sometimes I get so much chatter in my brain and so much going on around me that even instrumental music in the background while I'm working on schoolwork doesn't do the job. I have to shut it off and just enjoy the silence. And sometimes I do it naturally. And then all of a sudden I'm like, dang, it's quiet in here. 2 hours later when I realize I never turned on the TV, I never turned on Pandora, whatever. So back to ways that you can do this, real ways to practice. And I don't mean sitting there scrolling your phone quietly. I mean, sit in the car for 7 minutes, think, listen to the sounds around you, meditate, do not touch your phone. I know. Egads, how do we do that? No background noise, not even just to have something on, TV, radio, sound machine. Fold your laundry or drink your morning coffee in absolute silence with nothing, no kind of good morning, Miss Dawn, no kind of input from anywhere. Okay? Take your shower in silence. I have a speaker shower. I have a speaker in my shower. I do that on purpose. A lot of times when I'm in the shower in the morning, I listen to my daily devotionals. Again, that's me trying to maximize all of my time. But sometimes I don't do that. Sometimes I'm in the shower in complete silence and I'm just in there with my thoughts and water drops. You can ride to work in silence just one day. Or if you're riding instead of driving, you can actually look out the window. And this is something I rarely do because, again, I have this constant pressure on myself to make the most of all the downtime I have. So I'm doing things for my VIP community. I'm whatever. I'm doing preparation for Wellness Wednesday. There's any number of things that I may be doing. So a lot of times on road trips anymore, I've got my nose in my phone, even if they're short ones. I've got my nose in my phone and I'm not looking out the window and I miss a lot. So one of the things that you can do to be quiet is if you're the passenger, you can look out the window instead of at your phone. I know, what a novel idea. Used to do it all the time. Used to look at everything out the window. Look at that, look at that, look at that. Now I've got my nose in my phone and I don't even know how I got where I got. So ride to work in silence if you're driving or look out the window instead of your phone if you're the passenger. And meditate. Now I know this is a tough one for some people and there are some in certain, belief systems who don't think that meditation is okay. Meditation can look like whatever you want it to look like, okay? It can be just a couple minutes of silence. It can be a couple minutes of prayer. It can be a couple minutes of visualization. It can be a couple of minutes of focused breathing. It can literally look whatever you want it to look like. There's a clinical health psychologist in one of the articles I read who recommends that we just start with a minute. And that's how I started, y'all, and probably what I've got to go back to get restarted. 1 minute. And it's recommended for kids too. And again, it can look like whatever you want it to look like. You don't have to go find a giant mountain and meditate for 3 days. That's not what's required here. You don't have to add time to it either. 1 minute a day can do the job. What you have to do is stop filling the time with other stuff. So a lot of people say to me, well, I can't meditate because I can't get my brain to slow down long enough. It's kind of like the approach to I can't take yoga because I'm not a pretzel. You can't get there if you don't start. You know what I mean? I don't know of anybody that wants to be a pretzel, including me. But there's a lot of things that I can do with yoga that I never thought when I started I was going to be able to do. And I also never thought I would see the day where I would meditate for 10 minutes at a time. But I actually got to that point about a year ago. So you don't have to add time. It's not a requirement. You will never get your brain to be still if you don't give it a shot and if you don't stop and turn off the noise long enough to do it. So again, meditation, set a timer, 1 minute. It can, good morning, Miss Patricia. It can look like anything you want it to. But without outside sensory input. No screen, no music, no, and a lot of people meditate with music and that's okay too. But just try, yeah, Dawn, you meditate right into a nap and that's okay. But the point is, again, just to be silent for a short amount of time with no external sensory input outside of whatever nature is producing. Okay? And let me tell you something, when the weather's just right, meditation out on a couch cushion on a swing is amazing. But again, it can look like whatever you want it to look like. You can visualize, you can focus on breathing, you can turn it into an extended prayer, which is a lot of time what mine looks like. But just like I said, you don't have to add time, you don't have to make it long. You don't have to meditate like the people that live in monasteries. You just have to stop filling that time with everything else so that you can just be silent for a little bit. Okay, so my challenge to you this week, if you choose to accept it, is to find 10 minutes of no input, a 10-minute no input pause. What does that look like? No scroll, no sound machine, no people, no talking, no screens, no extra stimulation outside of what is occurring in nature if you happen to be outside. Just breathe and be still in a quiet room or a car. And let me know what you come up with when it finally gets quiet. Drop it in the comments, write it down, send me a message, whatever. But let me know what happens when you finally get quiet. And just remember these things as I finish up here. I chose Silent Night as part of my title, not because I was looking to redefine the meaning of this hymn or carol, but rather to borrow from its meaning. The night referenced in that song was quiet on purpose. It was not empty, it was full. And it was the kind of quiet that most of us haven't had in a while, right? So I just want us to remember as we go forward into the next week and into the rest of the holiday season and into 2026, silence isn't a gift. I mean, it is. It's something definitely worth being grateful for, but it's maintenance. It's a necessity. It's not a reward for finishing December. It's not a reward for finishing the year. It's how you get there. It helps you to get there. It helps you to survive it. It helps you to find joy in it. It helps you to make space to find that awe and joy that we talked about last week. So again, I challenge you, 10-minute, no input pause, no scroll, no sound machine, no people, no talking, no screens, no extra stimulation other than what's occurring naturally. Like I said, if you're outside, just breathe and be still in a quiet room or car in your backyard. And let me know what comes up. If you find any insight when you finally get that little bit of quiet time. Okay, drop it in the comments, write it down, send me a message, whatever. And I know I have a topic, but I didn't make a note of it for next week. So I have to look back at my list. I do try to plan ahead a little bit. Until then, I hope you have a fabulous week, and be well. Thanks for being here. Bye.